I just watched this film, the the Invisible Man, not the recent remakes, but the original from 1933, which is, whatever, 92 years ago, something like that. It's quite interesting watching a film that's 92 years old and seeing how things have changed. I mean, you can look back to sort of 1960, 1970, and yeah, things have changed, of course, with the digital revolution, but kind of still recognisable. But when you go back 90 years, you can see that everything has changed completely. And I can understand why people sort of mythologise about the past. But it was a strange place. It was really an alien place now. Anybody who wants to have a look at that film, anyway, I do recommend it. It's incredible for its time, especially with the special effects, which were all done, of course, without CGI. I mean, that goes without saying. But have you noticed that a lot of these populist parties, they talk about the past as though it's sort of some wonderful place to which we must go back to. It's all linked with nostalgia, a sense that things have gone wrong. And of course, some things have gone wrong, but it's got nothing to do, I don't think, with going back to the past. So, this is why I think there's some confusion about ID cards, digital ID cards, which they want to introduce in the UK. It's interesting, the backlash against ID cards. It's rather like sort of the Brexit movement or the MAGA movement. It's all based on some sort of violent emotional reaction to them. And it's this violent emotional reaction that happens in the UK against kind of modernising, not just modernising structure and the towns and the infrastructure, but modernising our understanding of what we're capable of as a country, and a kind of coming on board with a concept of a future. And you see this in the ID card argument. You see headlines and endless sort of talk radio and GB News kind of programs which suggest that this is a sort of return to Nazi Germany or something. I mean, the idea that people would not want to be identified in a society seems a bit strange in a way, doesn't it? I mean, let's say if you go back to village life or small town life, everybody knew who you were. Your identity was known. It was known to the local policeman. It was known to the mayor. It was known to the municipality. Everybody knew who you were as you wandered about. They probably knew everything you were up to. Of course, they didn't have sort of, data in the cloud on you necessarily, but people knew what you were up to. The idea that you can be invisible, like the Invisible Man, is a strange one. Yeah. So this is the problem in the UK, is that we can't sort of let go of our nostalgic mythologizing about the past and about what England is or Britain is. And nobody is going to change that, particularly not reform, or reform will just make it worse. But ID cards could be the beginning of something if they're part of an integral pattern of change. the usual culprits are trying to give the impression that this is a retrogressive step rather than a step into a great new future. I mean, we're always hearing about how the UK is broken. And in a way it is broken. But it's been purposely left to rot and left to ruin. It's become a decrepit place. As soon as you leave the UK, you meet the world as it really is today. Good infrastructure, high-speed train and rail links, well-kept roads, efficient health systems which are affordable, proper housing with insulation, and a fully digitalised economy. And that's what's happening in the rest of the world. But not in the UK. And even something as simple as an ID card, there's an arrogant conservatism that runs through the blood of the UK that refuses to modernise. It refuses to change. And it's been the same for 50 years, since 1970, when it had its chance. And when other countries were beginning to really invest in a sort of fairly luxurious infrastructure and systems as well. These crazy headlines from the Mail and Farage. Why? We're not becoming Nazis because we've got ID cards. What are they afraid of? So I have an ID card here. Where I live, you have to have an ID card. There it is. Quite simple. I also have a digital ID on my phone, which gives me access to a multitude of services here, where simply by accessing those services using my phone, they know who I am. It makes life much easier, much more efficient. And the idea of sort of bringing an electricity bill to prove where I live or to show who I am just seems absolutely ridiculous. As ridiculous as sort of carrying around bits of metal in my pocket in order to pay for a Mars bar. I haven't used cash for 5 years. I don't even remember what coins look like. It's not a government conspiracy. It just makes the economy and people's lives much easier, much smoother. I mean, there are certain things that I've noticed in contrast to the UK, which is a kind of free-for-all when it comes to these kind of things, is that it's very difficult to hide here. You can't really hide. Because in order to do almost anything, you have to kind of show your ID and then whatever you're doing gets registered with the authority you're dealing with, and all of the authorities can see exactly where you are and what you're doing. That's true. But, I mean, unless you literally want to hide, if you're a sort of career criminal, then who cares? It doesn't really matter. It's just a kind of mental thing, isn't it? I want to be anonymous. I don't want the government to know where I live. Well, if you're up to something, well, okay. But there's no point in sort of getting all funny about it and suggesting it's some sort of awful betrayal of your human rights to be invisible. I mean, I remember when I lived in London, I managed to evade the student debt organisation for must have been 8-10 years. You just move from flat to flat, from place to place. You just turn up, you show an electricity bill, and then you can, you rent the place. It's very simple. Nobody really knows where you are. There's no central register to which, the landlord or the housing association or, the workplace kind of logs you so that you can be found. That's true. But generally, just makes life work a lot easier. There are certain things which the British are reluctant to accept. ID cards is one, or euthanasia was another one. All of the negative articles and all the usual suspects jumping up and down about the idea that if somebody's in appalling suffering, that you can't actually help them to pass away, which is a bit weird, really. I mean, you put your dog in, you wouldn't want your dog to suffer, would you, or your cat? But you're quite happy to watch grandmum hanging on for 12 months in agony. Why? All this crap they come up with about, people are going to take advantage of they're going to have their mother put down or their father put down so they can inherit the house. It's just absolute nonsense. There's absolutely no reason why you can't have an effective way of making sure that doesn't happen. Just having a panel of doctors to make sure that it can't be done. And what's worse than that argument, of course, is the argument that it's kind of unchristian, that life is sacred, the sanctity of life. What a load of utter tosh. Just crap, made up rubbish, If I consciously would like to end my life for whatever reason, I don't give a damn about your so-called sanctity of life. Well, you sanctify your own life. Don't sanctify mine, thank you very much. Really bizarre. And there are one or two other ideas that we have, like, can you remember the reluctance to use a very, very simple digital weights and measurements, kilos and grams and what have you, centimetres and metres. Do you remember the uproar about that? We will never give up our pounds. And people there was actual campaigns run, the usual suspects again, Peter Hitchens and the thousands of others, and the Daily Mail and the Talk TV, wherever, or the equivalent at the time, the Telegraph. They will never take our pint. I mean, this is why Britain is a ruin. This is why it's decrepit. This is why it's just let itself fall into rack and ruin over 50, 60 years, because the people themselves are stuck. Or some of them are. Or some of them are being guided to be stuck by a kind of aristocratic elite, who are quite happy to live in their sort of Tudor mansions and wonderful Georgian London terraces, while the rest of us are rotting in houses which have got no insulation or falling apart and are made of concrete slabs. So why is it that ID cards could save Britain? Well, they're not going to save Britain on their own, are they? Although they will make life a lot easier. If you can just get over this kind of weird mentality that somehow you're giving in if you change and you become part of the future, you're already 50 years behind, in my opinion. So anyway, well, the reason is because Britain could be great. Not saying great again, but it could be great. But it will probably take 30, 40 years. And it needs to change. It needs to be built from scratch. Reform aren't going to do that. Because they're interested in the status quo. What do you think conservatism means? Conservatism means conserving the things that exist and have existed for a long period of time for the sake of it. Conservatism by its nature is anti-change. But you're hanging on to a dream from which we've all woken now. The rest of the world has woken. We've had 50 years of decline. We're decades behind other countries. You know that. You know if you leave the UK, you know that you're nearly always shocked at just how efficient and modern, and how the services in other countries seem to work better. The UK has to be rebuilt from scratch. And that can't be done by government. That can only be done by the people being led by local leaders, in a way. But that's another story, isn't it? You would need a hyper-radical approach. And it's a hyper-radical approach that either some parties are not imaginative enough or don't realise the extent of the rot to start, or it's parties like the populist parties who don't give a damn, who've got absolutely no vision for a future, and in fact want Britain to go back to some past, the sort of past that you can see if you watch the film The Invisible Man. People would have to be able to see the long-term benefit for themselves, because they'd have to be part of the reconstruction. But ID cards could be part of that. ID cards, digital streamlining could improve efficiencies in the NHS by 20-30%. But we have to be able to have the courage to adopt these. But anyway, just wanted to mention that. But as far as the reconstruction of the UK is concerned, I think I'll talk about that tomorrow. What would my blueprint be to take a country that has basically ruined itself in many respects? How do you rebuild an entire nation? Especially a nation which has lost touch with itself and now has no idea what it stands for. A nation which it's difficult to be proud of, no matter where you come from, for all sorts of different reasons. Okay, you've got blind patriotism and the flag waving, but most people aren't sure of their identity and are not sure which bits they can be proud of. So I'll give you my blueprint tomorrow, I think, or soon, in the next couple of days.